Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Jack loved the library. It wasn't just a grand towering sort with marble floors and intimidating librarian. This library nestled in a quiet corner of town felt like a secret. The smell of old pages, worn leather, and dust greeted him every time he pushed open the creaky wooden door. Today was no different, except for what he found tucked away on a forgotten shelf. He was exploring the farthest corner of the building, where shelves leaned slightly under the weight of books no one ever checked out. Most of the spines were faded, their titles long gone. One book, however, stood out. Its cover was plain, almost too plain, like it was trying hard not to be noticed. No title, no illustrations, just a worn, leather-bound cover. Curious, Jack pulled the book from the shelf. He flipped it open, expecting a title page or at least something to give a clue about what the book was about. Instead, every single page was blank, completely empty. Jack muttered. That's weird. He glanced around. The library was quiet, too quiet as if even the dust motes hanging in the air were holding their breath. He wasn't sure why, but he stuffed the book into his backpack before heading for the checkout desk. He'd return it later once he figured out what it was. Back home, Jack spread the book out on his bed. He grabbed a pencil from his desk and hesitated. The blank pages seemed to call to him, daring him to make the first mark. Taking a deep breath, he started sketching the outline of a forest. Tall trees with thick trunks, their leaves rustling in a breeze he could almost hear. The more he drew, the more the scene felt real. Then the book began to glow, faint at first, like the light of a candle, but it grew brighter till Jack had to squint. Before he could even think to drop the pencil, the book pulled him in. Literally, the pages sucked him in as if they were made of quicksand, dragging him into the drawing. Jack felt the ground vanish beneath his feet, the room spinning, colors swirling around him until Jack landed hard on the forest floor, gasping for breath. He stared at his surroundings in disbelief. The trees around him were tall, their canopies stretching so high that only slivers of sunlight filtered through. The air smelled like pine and earth, and in the distance, a river babbled softly. This can be real, Jack whispered. He rubbed his eyes, but nothing changed. He was still in the forest. The sound of twigs snapping behind him made him freeze. Slowly, he turned. Standing there, not 10 feet away, was a figure, a girl maybe a little older than him with sharp features and hair as dark as night. She wore a cloak that shimmered green and gold, blending with the forest around her. Her eyes were the sharpest part of her, a piercing emerald green. You, the girl said, pointing at Jack. How did you get here? No human can enter the realm without. I don't know, Jack stammered. I mean, 1 minute I was drawing in a book, and now I am here. The girl's eyes narrowed. She moved closer, studying him. Tare, a book? What kind of book? Jack pulled the now normal-sized book from his backpack and held it up. The girl's face changed instantly, her expression softening into a mix of curiosity and disbelief. That book inside the key? The what? Jack blinked, still trying to wrap his mind around everything. The key, it's a magical artifact, one that connects the human world to our world. But it was lost centuries ago. The girl seemed to be speaking more to herself than to him. I am Lyra, by the way, and if you have that book, you might be able to help you with what? Sighed, her shoulders drooping slightly. Tai, the shadow wizard, Malcha. He's been corrupting the magic in our world, turning it dark. If he isn't, he stopped, the entire realm will fall into chaos. And that book you found, it might be the only way to defeat him. Jack looked down at the book, then back at Lyra. He had no idea how he ended up in this situation. But if what she said was true, he just walk away. Lyra smiled for the first time, a small, quick smile that made her look less intimidating. Salk, we find the light brush. Their journey through the forest was both awe-inspiring and nerve-wracking. Jack marveled at creatures he'd only ever seen in stories, tiny glowing sprites that flitted between the trees, deer like animals with antlers that seemed to sparkle with magic, and plants that whispered secrets in the wind. But the beauty of the forest was overshadowed by a growing darkness. Every now and then, Jack caught glimpses of its shadows flickering at the edges of his vision, disappearing the moment he turned to look. Malchus' influence is spreading, Lyra explained as they walked. He corrupts the magic of the land, turning it against us. That's why the light brush is so important. It's the only thing that can erase his corruption. What exactly is the light brush? It's an ancient artifact created by the first magicians of this realm. With it, you can paint reality itself, change things, rewrite them. It's powerful, but dangerous if used wrongly. As they walked, Lyra told Jack more about the realm, about how the balance of magic was crucial to maintaining peace. Melcher, once a respected magician, had become obsessed with power, twisting the magic to suit his own desire. The realm was slowly crumbling under his rule, and the creatures that once lived in harmony were now either enslaved or in hiding. Why can't he use magic to fight him, Jack? Magic is tied to the land, and the land is dying, Clara said softly. Shiri, my powers are weakening, and Melcher only grows stronger. Suddenly, a loud crashing sound came from up ahead, followed by a low rumbling growl. Jack instinctively took a step back, his heart racing. Stay close, Litter whispered. We're not alone. They crept forward, moving cautiously toward the source of the noise. As they rounded a bend, Jack and his eyes widened in fear and amazement. Before them stood a giant easily 20 feet tall, with broad shoulders and arms as thick as tree trunks. His face was kind, though. His expression was troubled. Around his wrists and ankles were thick, black chains that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. That's sus, Balinor, Lyra whispered. Star giant cursed by Melcher. We need to help him. Jack gulped. Help a giant? But Lyra stepped forward, raising her hands. Balinor, we come in peace. The giant turned his head slowly, his eyes focusing on them. You are not from the shadows. His voice was deep like the rumble of distant thunder. No, Lyra said. We were here to stop Melcher. We can help free you from your curse. Balinor hesitated, then slowly knelt down to their level. Kara and I have been bound for too long. Candy rumbled. Sammy, if you can free me, I will aid you on your quest. Lyra motioned for Jack to step forward. Jack opened the magical picture book again, his hands shaking. He had no idea how to free a giant, but he did come this far, so he had to try. Taking a deep breath, he drew on the page this time, sketching the chains around Balinor's wrists and ankle. As soon as the drawing was complete, the book glowed faintly. A moment later, the chains around the giant shimmered and then dissolved into thin air. Balinor stood, stretching his massive arms. I'm sorry you have done it? Har, he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. Kai, I am free. Jack felt a surge of pride, but it was quickly tempered by the realization that their journey was far from over. We need to find the light brush, Lyra said. Stop hunting us. Balinor nodded. Then let us go together. I will protect you. Together, the unlikely trio, Jack, Lyra, and Balinor, set off on their journey toward the dark lands where Melcher waited, each step bringing them closer to the final confrontation that would decide the fate of both Jack's new friends and the realm itself. Balinor's massive footsteps echoed like distant thunder as the trio ventured deeper into the heart of the dark land. The air grew thick and oppressive, making it hard to breathe, and the trees, once full of life and magic, now twisted and gnarled, their bark blackened by some unseen rot. Jack could feel the weight of the book in his backpack, as if it too sensed the danger ahead. He clutched the straps tightly, trying to steady his nerve. Lyra, walking just ahead of him, kept her hand on the hilt of her dagger, her sharp eyes scanning their surroundings for any sign of Melcher's sand creature. Balinor, towering above them, was a silent but powerful presence, his newly freed limbs swinging with purpose as they marched toward the dark citadel that loomed on the horizon like a storm cloud. As they pressed on, Jack found his thoughts drifting to home, his parents, his school, his ordinary life that now seemed so far away. How long had he been here? It was impossible to tell. The days felt endless in this strange world. He wondered if he would ever find his way back, or if he even wanted to. There was something thrilling about the adventure, about being part of something bigger than himself. They had traveled for hours when Lyra suddenly stopped, holding up her hand for silence. Jack strained his ears, trying to catch what she had noticed. At first, there was nothing but the eerie whisper of the wind through the dead trees. Then he heard it, a faint rustling, as if something or someone was moving in the underbrush around them. We were being followed, Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. Jack Clark's heart pounded in his chest. He reached instinctively for the book, his fingers brushing the edge of it as he glanced nervously around. Shadows flickered at the corners of his vision, but every time he turned his head to look, they vanished. Blinner stepped forward, his enormous hand resting on the hilt of a stone club slung across his back. "We are not alone," he said, his deep voice rumbling through the ground beneath them. Suddenly, from the darkness, a figure leapt out. It was small, hunched, and cloaked in shadow. Before Jack could react, more emerged from the trees, twisted dark creatures with glowing red eyes and sharp claws. They were Melchor's minions, corrupted beings, twisted by his dark magic. Loigra drew her dagger, and Balinor swung his club, sending two of the creatures flying back into the trees with a single blow. Jack stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. He didn't know how to fight. What could he do? But then his gaze fell on the book again. He pulled it out, flipping it open with trembling hands. Without thinking, he began to sketch the scene in front of him, the creatures, the forest, his friend. As soon as his pencil touched the page, the book glowed and the scene around him began to shift. The creatures hesitated, their red eyes flickering uncertainly. Then in a flash, the trees around them sprang to life, their branches reaching down to entangle the creatures in a web of vines and roots. Lyra looked back at Jack, her eyes wide with surprise. "You did that?" Jack nodded, swallowing hard. I think so." Balinor finished off the last of the creatures with a swing of his club, sending the twisted being crashing into the ground. "You have power," he said, turning to Jack. "You can shape this world." Jack stared at the book in his hands, feeling a mix of awe and fear. He realized just how much power the book gave him, but with that power came responsibility, and the weight of it was starting to feel heavier than the book itself. "We need to keep moving," Lyra said, wiping her blade clean. "Melcher will know. We retire now." They pressed on, the atmosphere growing darker and more oppressive with every step. The land itself seemed to resist their progress, the ground becoming soft and treacherous, like walking on the edge of a swamp. Strange, distorted shapes loomed in the fog that began to thicken around them, casting eerie, shifting shadows that seemed to watch their every move. At last, they reached the base of a massive mountain. At its peak, barely visible through the swirling fog, stood Melchor's citadel, an imposing fortress carved from black stone, its towers jagged like broken teeth. "This is it," Lyra said quietly. Melchor's lair. Balinor gripped his club tighter. "We will face many dangers within those walls, but we must press on." Jack's stomach churned with a mix of excitement and dread. This was it, the final stretch of their journey. He could feel the tension building, not just within himself, but in the very air around them. The magic here was thick, oppressive, and it thrummed with dark energy. If they failed now, Melchor's corruption would consume everything. They began the climb, moving cautiously up the winding path that led to the citadel's gate. Jack's legs burned from the effort, but he pushed on, his determination outweighing his exhaustion. He couldn't stop now, not when they were so close. At the top, the gate stood open, a dark maw inviting them in. Lyra hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. Jack and Balinor followed. The interior of the citadel was cold and vast, its walls lined with strange glowing symbols that pulsed with dark magic. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, and Jack shivered as they moved deeper into the fortress. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the faint sound of chanting, Melchor's voice, deep and resonant, echoing through the stone hall. "He's close," Lyra whispered, her hand tightening on her dagger. They rounded a corner and entered a large circular chamber. At its center stood Melchor, his back to them, cloaked in shadow. His voice filled the room, a low, malevolent hum as he worked his dark magic. "You are too late," Melchor said, without turning around. His voice was smooth, almost amused. "The realm will fall, and soon the human world will follow." Jack's heart raced. The weight of the book in his hands felt heavier than ever. He knew what he had to do, but the fear was overwhelming. Melchor was powerful, and Jack was just a boy with a magical book. But then he looked at Lyra, standing tall and defiant beside him, and Balinor ready to fight with everything he had. They believed in him. They had come this far because they trusted him. Jack took a deep breath and opened the book. As he began to draw, Melchor turned, his eyes blazing with fury. "You think you can defeat me with that childish magic?" he sneered. Jack's hand trembled, but he didn't stop. He sketched the room, the citadel, Melchor himself. The book glowed, and the air around them began to shimmer. Melchor's magic faltered for a moment, and the shadows around him flickered. But it wasn't enough. Melcher raised his hands, and the room filled with darkness, swallowing Jack's light. The power of the Shadow Wizard was immense, and Jack felt his strength waning. "Jack, focus," Lyra shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. He gritted his teeth and kept drawing. He sketched the light brush, the one thing that could defeat Melcher. In his mind's eye, he saw it, an ancient, glowing brush that could rewrite reality itself. As the image took form on the page, the light brush appeared in his hand, shimmering with pure, radiant light. Melcher recoiled, his shadows shrinking away from the light. "No," he hissed, his voice filled with rage and fear. With a final desperate effort, Jack thrust the light brush forward, its glow flooding the room. The shadows melted away, and Melcher screamed as the light consumed him, his dark magic unraveling before their eyes. And then it was over. The citadel crumbled around them, the walls dissolving into dust as the dark magic that had held it together faded away. Jack stood there, the light brush still glowing faintly in his hand, feeling a strange mix of triumph and exhaustion. "You did it," Lyra said, her voice soft with awe. Bolinor smiled, a deep, satisfied rumble in his chest. "The realm is free." Jack looked down at the book in his hand, the pages now filled with drawings of their journey. He had done it. They had done it together. But now it was time to go home. He opened the book one last time and sketched a door, a simple wooden door that would take him back to the real world. The book glowed, and the door appeared before him. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes sad but proud. "Thank you, Jack. You will always have a place here if you ever wish to return." Bolinor nodded. "You are a true friend." Jack smiled, feeling a lump in his throat. "I'll miss you both." With one final look at his friends, Jack stepped through the door. The world around him shimmered and spun, and then he was back in his room. The book lay open on his bed, the pages blank once more. Jack stared at it, his heart still racing from the adventure. He wasn't sure if he'd see Lyra or Bolinor again, but he knew one thing for certain. The magic was real.